We've been going through the book of Acts, and the main problem with the book of Acts is the sections are so long, and it is a very long book. I have tried to fast forward this a bit, because the summer's coming to an end, and we're wrapping this series up called The Gospel on the Move, looking at the book of Acts. So I've tried to fast forward us a bit, but because of that, I've had to skip some chapters. So I want to give context here, and I want to make it, you're probably asking, what does this, anything that Paul just said have to do with me? It has nothing to do with you on the surface, but it has everything to do with you and me below the surface here. We didn't read Acts 21, but in Acts chapter 21, Paul's literally dragged out into the street by the Jewish mob, and he's beaten almost to the end of his life, until the Roman police come in, and then not only was he beaten and had that much insult and injury, but then they want to arrest him, and they want to torture him to figure out why the crowd is beating him. That doesn't make any sense to me, and hopefully it doesn't make any sense to you, why they want to do that. But just to give you the context, this is where Paul is standing up, and he's saying, the very first line that you had there, which was verse 1, he says, hear the defense. Hear the defense. Paul, starting in chapter 21, everything for Paul is going to change. This entire book of Acts is going to change. And the last part, the last quarter of the book, is all about Paul being put on trial. 5 different trials, actually, is what he's put on. And they're all wrong trials. They're all where he's misaccused of something. And so here we have a major turning point, because Paul is going to have to defend himself over and over again to people who are falsely accusing him of things. Now, I read this passage today, and I said on the surface, if you're probably thinking it has nothing to do with you. I don't think any of you right now in this little small group have any fear of being dragged out into the city by a mob and being beaten this morning. I hope you don't have any reason to fear that. I really do. So if you've not been taken out into the streets and beaten by the mob, how does this apply to you and me? Well, it's simply this. We all get attacked. Everybody attacks us at some point. At some point in our lives, we all feel that the mob, the other people are coming against us, judging us incorrectly, and we feel like we have to make a defense for ourselves. And that's true. You want to defend yourself to people. And in this passage, Paul shows us how the gospel helps us to defend ourselves when we come under attack. But he does it in an amazing way. When we get attacked, we go on the defense to protect ourselves. When Paul gets attacked, he gives them the gospel. This is unique because basically, I don't think any of us do this. I'm going to boil this down to 2 different ways that we can react when somebody attacks us. When the mob is attacking you, when somebody is accusing you of something, when a friend wrongs you, when a relationship goes sour, when you feel, especially in your marriage, that the spouse has done something to hurt you, and you want to go on defense. You have a couple choices. You can defend yourself the way Paul does today, which I'll unpack in a second. Or you can defend yourself in what I'm calling the turtle or the tiger way. I know, it sounds stupid. You got to bear with me. At least it's not food that I'm talking about. There's no food in this sermon at all today. There's a turtle and a tiger. And I'm being general because we don't have all day. I know you probably don't fit in neatly into one of these 2 categories, but bear with me because I think you probably fit into one of them at any given time. You're either a turtle or a tiger when you defend yourself. And here's what I mean. If you back a turtle into a wall, how does a turtle defend itself? It goes into the shell, right? It retreats within itself, and it's basically looks only at itself. And why I call this the turtle method is because when somebody attacks you and me and we go into our shell, we start to say things like, well, you know what, I don't deserve this. We start to say things like, look at all the good things I've done. Look at me, I'm good. I'm basically an okay person. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you hurting me? See, the turtle goes into a shell because the turtle fundamentally is all about itself. It just goes into a defense mechanism mode, and it goes into its shell. And that when we do that, when you and I do that when we get attacked, that's not what Paul does here. But when you and I go on the defense, we can either be like the turtle and say, look at me. I'm basically okay. Look at all the things I've done well. Look at all the things I'm good at. Why are you attacking me? Now, there's that way to defend ourselves. And then the other way to defend yourself would be the tiger defense, I'm going to call it this morning. And you're starting to see where I fit into one of these, and I'm not going to tell you which one. You have to get me mad in order to see it, but don't attack me this morning. You'll find out whether I'm a turtle or a tiger, but I'm clearly one of these. And if my wife were in the room, she'd know exactly what I am right now. See, the turtle goes into its shell and says, look at me, look, I'm okay. Stop doing this to me. It's me, 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 me. The tiger, if you back a tiger into the wall, what do? They arch their back, they show their teeth, they hiss, they puff, they have this weird puffing noise that they make, and they'll eventually lash out at you. See, a tiger defense is a way of saying, not necessarily looking at yourself saying, look how good I am, look how basically okay I am, and justifying yourself, but rather it's attacking the other person. It's saying, wait. Look at all the mistakes you've made. Look at all the things you've done wrong. And in order to do that, we lash out and we tear down, because that's what tigers do. That's what animals do. They have one of those two visceral reactions when backed into a corner. You may even do both at the same time. You can call it a turgor defense, I guess. It's not a real animal. Hopefully, that would be a weird animal. Mixed a turtle and a tiger together, you'd be a turgor. But you're bound to be one of these ways to defend yourself. Wow, that would almost devolve quickly too. You're bound to be one of these ways to defend yourself. I'm guaranteeing you can think about whether you're a turtle or a tiger. Paul is neither of them today. He's all about the gospel when being attacked. And I thought about this. Why do these animals do this when they are attacked? Why is it our animal nature to want to defend ourselves? Quite naturally, it's fear. The fundamental reason why you and I want to defend ourselves when attacked, when the mob's coming down on us, when people are betraying us, when they're accusing us of things wrongly, we want to go either into turtle mode or tiger mode. Why? Because of fear. There's always a deep down lurking fear behind us. And I realize that in my sermons, when I try to quote things for you, I've realized I quote old, dead Englishmen way too much. And I'm not going to do that right now. I look back at my notes, and they're all old, and they're all dead, and they tend to be English or European that I quote. I don't know why I do that. So I'm going to stretch my horizons a little bit today. I'm quoting somebody who's alive, and somebody who's a female, and somebody who's very much alive and active, and not from England at all. At least I don't know where she's from. You guys, most of you will know Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. And she wrote her book recently, Lean In, which is a bestseller. And it's all about her overcoming fears, her overcoming adversity to lead Facebook, to be in corporate America, and still maintain her motherhood, her daughterhood, her being a wife, and to keep all of those things in balance. It's a good read, but there's a part in there where she talks about fear. And she sums it up, and of course she says this about women. You and I, guys, here in the room, it's the same for us, right? Okay? We all have this fear. And she says this, she says, fear is at the root of so many of the barriers women face, and it's men too. Fear of not being liked, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of drawing negative attention, fear of overreaching, fear of being judged, fear of failure. And she says the holy trinity of fear, the fear of being a bad mother, a wife, or a daughter. And then she goes on to say in the next paragraph that there's a poster in the Facebook headquarters that she always has loved, and it's still there to this day. And it says, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Now, fundamentally, fear is a good thing. And I know that sounds kind of anti-logical. Fear is a good thing. I have a massive fear of heights. And that's good, because if I'm ever on top of a building, my fear of heights is going to preclude me from jumping, because I know that I'm afraid of this heights, and there's something about heights that I should be afraid of, and I can't fly, so I don't jump. Fear is fine. Fear can be a good thing, but the fear that Paul could have felt today when the mob's attacking him, the fear of failure, is the fear that you and I, that lurks. And this is why when you and I are backed into a corner, we either go into turtle mode or tiger mode. Now, how does Paul do this? Because we're all trying to work on ourselves today, I hope. I mean, that's why you're at church. You're trying to know God and know what God wants for you. And here's what God wants us to see today. How do you and I defend ourselves to other people? What mode do we go into, and how can we work on that? And what does the gospel say about that? Paul does it by showing two things. Incredible humility. And he shows incredible humility, but he points to what I'm going to call an enduring hope. In his defense, he's neither a turtle nor a tiger. He looks like a turtle at first. I'm going to explain that. He's neither a turtle nor a tiger. Paul instead uses the gospel, explains the gospel, gives his testimony, and he does it radically. The first things, before I go on to this, is the first things you should see is that Paul is very calm, first of all, when he speaks. We didn't read it, but he speaks first in Greek, and then he speaks in Aramaic so that everybody can understand him. Get this image here. Now try to imagine, I'm Paul, not me. Paul's standing here. He's bloodied. He probably has broken bones. His clothes are ripped and torn. And he turns to the very crowd that was going to do that to him, that was trying to kill him. And he's calm. He says he raised his hand to make a gesture, which meant in that time that it was like an orator. He would have waved his hand to say, wait a second, let me talk to you guys. Let me give you this defense. And he does it here first with incredible humility. We read this whole passage. It's just, all it is Paul giving his testimony. Do you see this? Paul saying, I was this way, then I met Jesus, and now I am this way. If you can think about that for a second, that is incredibly weird to defend yourself. Imagine that somebody hurts you, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your friend, they hurt you. What's your first reaction? It's probably not to stand up and give your testimony and to say, wait a second, here's what God did for me in my life. But this is what Paul does, and this is why it's humble. This is why it's incredibly humble. He gives his testimony, but if you look at verse 16, if you have a Bible, unfortunately we can't go back and look at it on the screen. Verse 16 is where it culminates. Ananias looks at him and says, what are you going to do now? Go, cleanse yourself and be baptized. Now, this is scandalous humility on Paul's part. Everybody would have looked at him like he had horns growing out of his arms and his head because of this. Paul recounts his entire life saying, look, I've been the best Jew. I've studied under Gamaliel, this famous teacher. I've done everything right, is basically what he's saying. I followed all the rules. I did everything the right way in my life. And now it looks on the surface like a turtle, right? Remember I said the turtle was the one who goes into the shell and says, look at me, look how good I am. When they're defended, the turtle wants to point out all the good things that they do. And it looks like that's what Paul's doing here, saying, look at all the good things I've done. I've been a moral person. I've studied the Bible. I've prayed all the time. Why are you attacking me? But this isn't a turtle at all. And it's not a tiger because he's not lashing out at them. What he's doing actually is saying this. I have every right to say that I'm a good person, but I still had to be baptized. Let me explain how scandalous and how humble this is. Baptism, of course, in the Christian community, we know baptism is the symbolic way you show that you are washed. It's a symbolic way in which you say to the community of Christ, I believe that Jesus washed me of my sins. I believe that I was dirty and nasty deep down inside, and Jesus had to go all the way in and cleanse me from all the way in. That's what baptism meant, or means to us. Baptism to this audience, a Jewish audience at this time, would have meant the same thing, purification, cleansing. But Jewish people only baptized you if you were a Gentile coming into their faith. See, Paul was a Jew, and yet he says, I was just as dirty, as broken, as needy, as sinful as everyone else, and probably more so. See, Paul starts his defense. He says, wait, guys, you're attacking me. Let me defend myself. I'm such a horrible person. Now, that's neither a turtle nor a tiger. That's incredible. That is a deep wellspring of humility to say the minute that I'm going to get attacked by somebody, I'm going to pause and say, wait, you're attacking me. Let me defend myself. I am a horrible sinner in need of grace. And this is the gospel. It says that no matter how good you and I think we are, no matter how much of an appearance we have, no matter our history, no matter what we've done in the past, good or bad, God says deep down inside, everyone is dirty, everyone needs cleansing. And Paul knows this. Paul doesn't look at himself for his defense. He just admits how broken he is. How awesome would that be? The next time you and I defend ourselves, we don't go in turtle mode or tiger mode. We start to just say, you know what? I need grace. I did everything right in my life, but it doesn't matter because it was all wrong, apart from God and apart from Jesus. But he doesn't just have incredible humility. He points to this enduring hope. You notice he tells this story about his conversion account. And he says, Jesus knocks him, the light rather, knocks him down on the ground, and Jesus looks at him, and Jesus has this interesting phrase, which I don't know if any of your translations get it. I don't know. It always is translated, why are you persecuting me? And the word actually means, in the Greek, why are you chasing me unto death? So Jesus, keep in mind, he's in heaven, if you believe that story, of the conversion story. He's in heaven looking at Paul and he says, why are you chasing me unto death? He's basically, it's almost like a sarcastic thing. Why are you doing this, Paul? Don't you realize I've already died for you and I've already risen for you? He says, look, why are you chasing me unto death? I've already taken care of that. You remember that Sheryl Sandberg quote I gave at the beginning, the fear of failure. The fear of knowing our own limits, the fear ultimately of you and me disappearing from this earth and nobody remembering us, the fear that everyone turns their back on us, the fear that we're rejected, dejected, and alone. Jesus says, I've taken that fear. You don't need that anymore because the greatest thing that the greatest fear in the world, death, I've already dealt with. Jesus gives us a hope beyond all hopes. He's ultimately the only God who was really courageous for us because he defeated the thing that you and I fear the most. Yeah, we fear failure, I know. You fear being ridiculed. You and I fear being attacked, especially by the ones we love the most. We want to make a defense for ourselves, but beneath all of our fears is that one fundamental fear that Jesus says, I've already dealt with it. Do you know the Garden of Gethsemane? The story, very famous, of Jesus praying in the middle of the night. And at that moment, theologians say he saw what was going to happen to him. He probably knew it in some way and knew it in his head that he was going to die, knew that he was going to be sacrificed, but then he got a glimpse of it. One pastor said that the fires of hell opened up and he felt the heat. And Jesus cries, he's sweating drops of blood, and he has the chance to leave. You see, when the people come to take him away, he doesn't have the chance to leave anymore. It's already in progress, in motion. He had the chance to leave, to bail on you and me. And yet he was courageous enough to face that fear. To say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice myself for them so that they never have to fear again. I have said before, why does the turtle and the tiger, when backed into a corner, defend themselves by either going into the shell or lashing out? Why? Because of that fear. That primordial, visceral fear that you and I feel. The fear when we're attacked that we will be found out as failures. The fear when we're attacked that we don't feel good enough. The fear that when somebody attacks us, that there's something wrong with us. And Jesus says, did you see the courage I had for you? That's the courage you can display. You can have incredible humility to know how broken you are, but you have incredible hope to know what I did for you. He says, Paul, why are you chasing me unto death? That's already been conquered. No more fear. One of my favorite poems, it's very famous, I guess, by George Herbert. He was I think he was Anglican. He's a pastor, priest. He wrote a poem and he writes about this fear. But he writes about what the gospel does to it. If we believe that the underlying fear of everything, the fear of failure, the fear of not being liked, as Sandberg said, the fear of being rejected, all beneath it is the fear ultimately of death. George Herbert says, listen, Christian, this is how you can respond to death, and this is how you and I can respond to every time we're ever attacked. I'll put it in your outline there and on your bulletin. It's a dialogue between a Christian and death himself. And they're going back and forth, and this is one part where the Christian says, alas, poor death, where is thy glory? Where is thy famous force, thy ancient sting? And death looks at the Christian and says, alas, poor mortal, void of story, go spell and read how I have killed thy king. Death says, fear me because of what I did to your King Jesus. But the Christian responds, poor death, and who was hurt thereby? Thy curse being laid on him makes thee accursed. So he's kind of laughing at death. And death wants to get the last word in. This ultimate fear wants to say this, let losers talk, yet thou shalt die. These arms shall crush thee. But the Christian gets the last word because of the gospel, and the Christian responds, spare not, do thy worst. I shall one day be better than before. Thou so much worse that shall be no more. How cool would it be, like Paul, being attacked by the mob, he stands up and says, let me defend myself. Spare not. Do thy worst. I shall one day be better than before. See, the gospel tells you and me this. If Jesus has already taken care of death and all that fear, and the fear of emptiness and loneliness and hopelessness that you and I wrestle with, and I know we all do, and if he's taken away that fear, then there is nothing to fear anymore. And if there's nothing to fear, there's no reason that we have to defend ourselves anymore. We can be incredibly humble and incredibly hopeful at the same time. This is what Paul is when he's being attacked by the mob. And we'll see it again and again. Every time he's attacked, he pulls out the gospel. And he says, the good news is that Jesus died the death I should have died so that I can live with him for eternity. That joy and that hope is the greatest defense we'll ever need. Now, 1 John 4:18 to conclude says, a lot of people say, I don't want to be fearful in my life. I don't want to be afraid. When I get attacked, I don't want to be afraid anymore. So what I'm going to do is just say, get a lot of courage. The world tells us this. The world says, when you're afraid, just take heart, have courage, and you'll get through it. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible doesn't say that the opposite of fear is courage. No. It says the opposite of fear is perfect love. 1 John 4:18 says this, that perfect love, like the love you and I can get on the cross, and only on the cross, is the only thing that's going to drive away fear. It's the only thing that's going to make you and I rest in humility and in hope when we are attacked. And you're going to be attacked, I know, starting tomorrow, maybe at your workplace, starting in school, starting in your relationships, starting maybe in your marriage or in your friendships. There's going to come a time, and it may be this week, that you are attacked. And I'm going to work on this with you guys. Because like I said, I'm definitely either a turtle or a tiger. Don't attack me or you'll find out which one I am. But I'm one of them, and you are too. But we have a choice. We can either react like those animals or we can react with the gospel. And know that perfect love, only perfect love, given by Jesus, accepted by us in grace for free, only that perfect love will drive away fear. But it takes a long time. That's not going to happen overnight, obviously. We got to work on this as a community, as individuals. And C.S. Lewis, yes, I'm back to quoting old dead Englishmen, okay? C.S. Lewis has a great quote. And Sammy reminded me that I haven't quoted C.S. Lewis in like 4 weeks, so I'm in a dry spell. Here, I get to pull him out again, and I'm so happy about it. C.S. Lewis says this, perfect love, we know, casteth out all fear, like 1 John says. But so do several other things. Ignorance, passion, presumption, and stupidity. It is very desirable that we should all advance to that perfection in love in which we fear no longer. But it is very undesirable until we have reached that stage that we should allow any inferior agent to cast out our fear. C.S. Lewis says, wouldn't it be great if you and I all got this perfect love, if it sank into our hearts and the gospel went in deep and it changed us from within, and that perfect love casts out all fear? C.S. Lewis says it doesn't happen overnight. But if you and I use any other thing, either self-defense or attack mode, to drive away fear, it will never, ever do the job. And he says, let's wait until perfect love casts out all that fear, but until it does, until the gospel is completely just wrapping us up like a blanket full of warmth, so that we can react in humility and in hope. Until that comes, don't use anything else. Can you look at your attackers and say, like George Herbert said, spare not, do thy worst. I shall one day be better than before. And then later on, George Herbert compares he says that death was an executioner. The gospel makes him a gardener. Basically, what do you have to fear? When you go in defense mode, don't be a turtle, don't be a tiger, don't be a turger. Bring it with the gospel. Share your testimony, more broken than you ever imagined, yet with all infinite hope beyond what you could ever believe. Let's pray together.